do another short video, 20 to 30 minutes. It's Monday around like noon, and yeah, I said I was going to run out of vinyl albums to talk about. So, since these are about my book that I wrote, I figured I'd list 5 music books that have been influential in how I wrote my book. I could have included some other like poetry books like PJ Harvey's Orlum, which I read. I don't read a lot of poetry stuff. I bought some Patti Smith books recently, but I haven't been through any of them. And yeah, I don't know poetry. Song lyrics, I guess they could also be called or termed poetry, but I don't really read poetry books. Um, Maybe I should get into it a little bit, but I just like reading song lyrics, if anything. And anyway, I'm not really a lyric guy to begin with. So in 2023, I wrote them as individual songbooks, which I think I mentioned before. So I had 54 individual songbooks, and I figured I would sell them on Amazon for like $3, $4. Maybe they were like 15 to 20 pages long with the preface of what the album was about, and then all the lyrics to the songs. But yeah, I didn't make any headway with that plan. I think I sold 3 or 4 copies, like I said before. So those are gone from my Amazon page because I made it into an anthology with all 54 songbooks with the prefaces and some other stories and updates that I put in there. And this book became about 1,000 pages, and half of it's lyrics, half of it is just random nonsense from my brain that's kind of related to the albums that I was working on, whether it was from 2006, 2010, whenever, 2020, last year. I wrote a couple albums. So I don't want to keep repeating myself, but yeah, it's been a weird process, man. Writing lyrics was tough. Making the album artwork was very, very difficult. Like, and now my main difficulty is marketing, which is what I'm doing now, really. I'm trying to put myself out there if anyone ever watches these videos. And maybe it would spark some interest if people, I think a lot of people, when you're young, you have aspirations to have some kind of artistic um, persona to escape from, the routine, everyday, wherever you're from in the world. You know, I grew up in New Jersey, southern New Jersey, right close to Philadelphia. But I think this is relatable to a global audience. The book I wrote, it's not just for an American audience or an East Coast audience. Anyone could really relate to this book, I think. And I do enjoy reading music biographies and trying to be more educated about genres, jazz music, blues music, because it is cool to have that knowledge where you can speak to other people regarding the history of blues music or folk music and all that's good stuff. Like I don't really have that in my brain to lead a conversation at least. Like no, I don't have that. I can't just pretend that I'm not educated about music history and stuff. But I do enjoy reading music books more than any other book probably. And around 2020, I would usually go to work in Philadelphia and just isolate myself in my office, and I read books like that because it was kind of slow at our company anyway. And for a good while, man, that's all I did. Like I would just read all day at work, and then I would like meditate outside. If there was any work, I would do that. But most of the time, I was just reading to pass the time, reading and trying to get back into shape back in 2020, 2021, because I was like going through a lot of changes back then. And some of these books I read during that period, some of these came later. And to be honest, I haven't read anything in like, I don't know, 5, 6 months. I don't even know the last book I read. It's been a long, long while. I'll buy stuff off of Amazon. I think the last book I read was like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic book, because that's like all my brain could handle while I was going through this writing process and everything. It was actually pretty good. It's like a modern retelling of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But yeah, I like reading music books more than anything. I think a lot of people like that, or share that sentiment. But I was reading a lot of stuff back then, political stuff, religious stuff. I mentioned in my book I got into like Dostoevsky stuff. I read like 3 or 4 of his books, and then I read like a bunch of older, classical classics. But it wasn't like, I don't know. I didn't set out to pick books. Like I would go to a thrift store, find some books, and that one looks cool. So it was never like a strict. Oh, I need to read these. This one I have to read before this one, and then it wasn't like that. It wasn't like I was going to some school that I was designing a reading list for. It was just coming at me naturally, pretty much. Because I love going to thrift stores and finding books for $1, $2 is pretty interesting to me. Just like finding records. I even, um, well, that was like a long time ago. I bought like, there's a website called Max Sold where you can buy like an estate sale online and bid on stuff. And I bought like, I don't know, like 500, 600 books, and it was really stupid. I thought I could make a bunch of money off of it, but the only really way I tried to sell these books was like at a flea market, like just like one time, and it wasn't very successful. I was like giving the books away. So, and to be honest, I'm kind of like that. I don't buy books now on physical copies. I only buy digital copies. The last book I bought on a physical copy was like the Pat Croce book, I Feel Great, because I talk about that in my own book. And I wanted to have a copy of it. I didn't even read it. But sometimes there's certain books you can't get on Kindle. So that was the last time I bought an actual like physical copy of a book. It was like the Pat Croce book from probably like 20, 30 years ago. And it actually has a foreword by Bill Cosby, which made it a little weird. It's a good book though. Pat Croce's. I saw him when I was a little kid at the Spectrum. He did like an inspirational speech, and yeah, I was always kind of a fan of his. And he had connections to the Sixers and stuff. He's just a cool dude. I mentioned him in my book in one chapter, and I already rambled for like 10 minutes, so I'll just get to the 5 books that music book of all time. But this was probably from I don't know, 5 years ago. It's Joni Mitchell biography. I had to show it on my other tablet, so it's probably not going to look good, but it's Joni Mitchell, Reckless Daughter by David Yaffe, Yaffe. I think it was from like 2017 or so. Yeah, 2017, David Yaffe. And yeah, Joni Mitchell, I got pretty obsessed with her, man. I completely fell in love. Even her painting and stuff. I mentioned her a lot in my book. When I was doing like my album artwork, I was looking at other musicians who also do like visual arts, and she's got some cool paintings, man. There was a whole YouTube video about her process of creating abstract art and stuff, and she compared it to like composing music. But yeah, her book was good. Joni Mitchell biography. I would recommend it. goes from her childhood where she got polio when she was a kid, and it kind of affected her throughout her life. I think that's a reason why she uses all those weird tunings and stuff. And it just talks about her whole journey from wherever she was from in Canada to New York in the folk scene, and then to California. And her entire life is like documented in this, and it goes through a lot of her albums, the inspiration for a lot of her songs, and she's just got a really interesting story, and it's definitely inspirational if the person is that interesting, like Joni Mitchell. Like, she had a crazy life, man. And do I can you know when I wrote my book, am I writing it like in a fashion like this? Not really. Mine is just more based on each concept album that I came up with, and trying to really describe to myself what I'm trying to say in my songs, because half the time I don't even fucking know. I still don't know if you can drop f bombs on YouTube, but whatever. I think I dropped a couple already, and I haven't gotten censored yet. So half the time I don't even know what I'm effing talking about. And a lot of these songs and lyrics were written in a short period. Like, I had these songs stored on my computer or other hard drives, and I just never did anything with it. I would write something, save it, and then just not do anything ever. And then finally in 2022, I was like, maybe I should organize these and try to make albums and write lyrics and stuff. So that's when I became a night owl over like 4 or 5 months. And I would just work through the night and write lyrics for all these different albums. And I already said it in my first video, I think, that they were terrible lyrics, like really bad, just pretentious and nonsensical. And I don't even know, man. But the editing took another like 6 months, like, to sound like a coherent message. At least I could bullshit my way, like, oh yeah, this song's about this, even if I don't even know what it's about. I could bullshit my way through it and be like, yeah, this song's about this political whatever. Like, at least I could kind of have an explanation. Sometimes it is real though. There are real songs on here that are meaningful to me, and but it's tough because I'm not a lyric person. I'll go through an album and I don't even pay attention to the lyrics. At least the first few times I listen to something, most of the time at least. And then later I might notice the lyrics once the songs are like more familiar to me. But yeah, so it's hard. I wrote this in my like first chapter. Like, I'm kind of disparaging the power of lyrics and words and poetry as I'm writing a book of lyrics and poetry. So I'm saying like lyrics don't even matter that much, but I'm writing a book based on my lyrics, which is kind of stupid to say, but that's just how my brain works. This is another female, Carrie Brownstein. I read this book a couple years ago. This one, it just documents her entire life from childhood and how she became involved in the punk scene, and how she just wanted to like escape to that musical realm to find a different, like, I don't know, path in life or something. It's a really good book. It's been a couple years since I read it, so it's not fresh in my head, but I would recommend it to anybody. She's very honest about her life as a musician and where she came from, all the tough times on the tour while she was touring, stuff she was going through. And yeah, it was interesting to me because it's a very honest portrayal of her musical career, musical life, all the conflicts within her band and other conflicts and family stuff. And you should read this book. It's really good. She's awesome, man. Like, Portlandia is one of my favorite shows. And this book really fan of Sleater Kinney. I really didn't listen to them much until like I don't know the last 4 years or so. I had a lot of time to explore music that I never really had the urge to explore before. And Sleater Kinney was one of those bands that kind of I was very late to the party on, but I'm a pretty big fan. Well, I wrote a book called The Gay Dinosaur Agenda, which is a children's book not intended for children. But I never wrote an actual book like about my life or my politics or my beliefs or my songs, I guess. And I think my writing improved over the last year or so. Even when I wrote my individual songbooks, like I didn't know so much about the editing process. Like, don't use the same words over and over again. And transitions were a problem for me to make it easier to read for people. I wasn't very good at that. I think I've gotten a lot better, but I'm not a professional. I'm publishing this book, DIY. I don't have a publisher or an editor to tell me, well, this doesn't fit the proper formatting, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think I really want that. Like the type of book I'm writing, do I really need an editor to tell me we don't like these song lyrics? Like I don't know. It's kind of different than if I was writing a short story or like a collection of short stories. Maybe I would need an editor to really tell me that this isn't working. You need to make these transitions better. There's no dynamic nature to these characters, and whatever an editor tells a writer. I don't know the process, man. Like I said, I never thought I would be writing a book of all this stuff. So maybe the rawness that I write with, because I do curse a lot. I'm trying not to curse when I make videos because it's like, it's different to drop F bombs every other word when you're speaking or when you're writing and you use like F bombs. Like, I'm more comfortable when I write it for some reason than when I talk. At least when I'm making videos like this. Yeah. But I don't know. When you're half my book is lyrics and poetry. Like, do poets and songwriters, do they send in their lyrics to get edited? I honestly don't know, but I would say probably not, right? This book is completely different, and I did use some of the chapters as a model. You can't even see it. I didn't know how else to really show it, but this is NOFX, Hepatitis, Bathtub, and other stories. Yeah, you won't be able to see it because of the glare and stuff. Apologies. It's a cool cover if you look it up. And I love punk books too. To be honest, punk documentaries. I love watching punk rock documentaries on Tubi, TUBI. It's like an Amazon type of streaming service. They have just tons of punk rock documentaries, and they're just very well made. Either from like this, a lot of them are from the Southern California punk rock scene or Washington D.C. There was one about that. There's one about like Steve Albini and like the Chicago scene, and yeah, they're really well made. But this book, No Effects, it kind of splits it up into each band member tells their chapter, and then like a different band member will tell their chapter, and it just goes like that. And it's a unique type of experience. And I got through this one really quickly because the stories are just a lot of them are funny, disgusting, like typical punk rock stuff. Their touring process, how they met each other, how they formed the band, how they grew when they got El Jefe. He's one of my favorite guitarists overall. I put him on my list. My favorite guitarist. I think he's one of the underrated guitarists, man. He's just amazing musician wise. He's just crazy good. And I've been a fan of NoFX since I was a teenager. This book kind of made me like them even more because they have they're like Frank Gallagher from Shameless. They don't give a shit. They'll tell any story, no matter how humiliating or disgusting it is. And I like to be like that too. Um, it's a good way to look at life because everyone has those shameful moments. Whatever. Why are people trying to shame other people to begin with? Like, why do people do that? Every religion like states explicitly don't judge other people, but then the only people I know who judge other people are religious people. Just like me cursing, saying a word like fuck. Like, why is that word bad? Who came up with that? Some religious person. And just stuff like that. Like, why do people set out to shame other people to leverage language as a weapon, leverage sexuality as a weapon? What's wrong with these people? Like, don't they have their own lives to do shit with? They have to spend every waking moment like messing with somebody else. It's very strange to me to use any of your energy in life to try to shame other people. I'm going off on tangents again. This video is going to be like 40, 50 minutes if I keep doing this. I talked about it before. Some people might not like this band because of some comments they made in the past or some political stuff. I don't know them personally, but they seem like cool people. They seem like very honest people, no bullshit. And yeah, they've been doing it since the 80s. Like, how many punk bands last that long? Open up their own record label, do it themselves how they want to do it. They're not told by any record company when to do stuff or how to do stuff. You got to respect that lifestyle. And yeah, they're amazing musicians. Like, you can't deny it. Even if you hate some of the things they've said or their politics, they just write great songs. And yeah, go check it out. There was a couple punk books that I could have talked about. There was a Keith Morris one from the Circle Jerks and Off. That was really good. There's a Bad Religion book similar to this one. But the NoFX one I couldn't put down because it was just full of really disgusting humor and stuff like that. If I would compare my book in the fashion of another book, it would probably be this one. If you can see this cover, this one came out a couple years ago. Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run, and I'm not sure what year it came out. I read this probably in 2020 or 2021, and I liked how he set this book up because he's got so much material. It's set up like a usual memoir. Like, he talks about how he got his start, his family when he was a kid, his upbringing in New Jersey, his conflicts with family, his early influences, and how he got started playing music. And it's all just interesting stuff to me. But he also goes by album too, almost. Like, he'll talk about each album and where he was in life when he wrote those albums, like Nebraska, Born to Run, and it's really well written. Even if you're not a big fan of Springsteen, it's a well written book, and you'll probably end up a bigger fan by the end of it. At least, at least that's what I believe. He talks about personal stuff as well, like battling depression and stuff like that. He talks about just working with other people and the music business a little bit. He goes all over the place. It's not as fresh in my mind. I read this 4 years ago now, so I can't really speak in specifics about a lot of the stories. But when I wrote my book, I was kind of influenced by this one the most, I think, because I wanted to set it up in a similar way. I start with my earliest albums and then I go down the line until I get to 2024 with the two albums I wrote last and that's how my book's set up, starting in 2006 to 2024. And I don't really like speaking about family stuff, personal stuff like that. So I don't talk about it too much. I'd rather just talk about stupid nonsense in my head, stuff I was exploring around the time I wrote these songs and stuff, and just the process in general of how I managed to put this book together, the frustrations, and I'm still kind of like, well, what are my expectations at this point of this book? Once I'm done with it and I put it on Amazon, what are my expectations at this point? I don't really have any, because I realize it's very hard to put yourself out there to a global audience without some kind of distributor, without some kind of major publisher. It's nearly impossible to get even your foot in the door without some kind of backing like that. So my expectations are nothing. Like whether I sell 100 million copies or like two copies, it's not going to shock me. Um, or anywhere in between. And yeah, the marketing side is going to be difficult because there's nothing else I can really do. Like I could make a social media page on every site: Instagram, Facebook, whatever Twitter's called, X, whatever it's called, and TikTok, and whatever else, man. I tried doing an Instagram page, and that was a headache. That was a weird experience. Is that going to help me? Making these YouTube videos, like, is anyone going to watch these anyway? Like, that's where my head's at, at this point. So I don't know. I'm doing this because it's more for my own like therapy session at this point. That I wrote this book over the last 2 3 years, and I'm at that last stage where it's pretty much done. I have about 800 pages to go through, and then I'll probably release it sometime in early May. Favorite music book. I wish, I'll find a different way to list these book covers because it probably looks really bad showing a screen on a screen. I wasn't really thinking it would be that difficult to show off these covers. This is Astral Weeks by Ryan H. Walsh. I was never a big Van Morrison fan. A lot of people that I respect always cite Astral Weeks as like a big album, so I did listen to it and I do like it. I put it in my list of like 501 albums that shaped my life or whatever. Because after reading this book, I appreciated it more. Learning about the story of 1968, all the weird synchronicities that he talks about. Like this book is really, it's about Van Morrison and his album and how he wrote it and how all the weird stuff surrounding it. And I wish I could speak more about it because I read this like 10 years ago, probably. And I know he talks about some weird cult that was going on around the same time. That's where I would say it's like a lot of synchronicity that was in the air in 1968, and he gets really in depth about this stuff because there's a like a weird mysterious quality to 1968. I don't know. I'm not a new age guy, like I said, but he goes into that and kind of documents all these things that were occurring at that time, and it was a time of like revolutionary change and stuff, so it kind of makes sense, I guess, that something different was in the air around that period of time. But yeah, this book's amazing. But yeah, he's in a band, Hallelujah the Hills, so check them out too. And to say maybe he's with Marissa Nadler. I think I remember that. But yeah, his music's pretty cool. I did check it out back when I first read this, and it was pretty enjoyable stuff. If you like Van Morrison's album Astral Weeks, you'll like this book. If you just like the '60s culture and the subculture and learning about weird stuff like that, you'll like this book. I need to read it again. I only read it the one time, and it was just really, really good. And that's about it. That's 5 books that kind of influenced how I wanted to write my book. I'm not saying that like I don't know if I would even compare my book to any of these. You know, these are all known people. Everyone knows Joni Mitchell. Everyone knows Carrie Brownstein, Van Morrison, Bruce Springsteen, NOFX. Like they have fan bases, loyal fan bases that you know even today people want to work with Joni Mitchell. And I think there was a Brandy Carlisle podcast I listened to where she was talking about jamming with Joni Mitchell and stuff like that. So my book is way different because nobody knows who the hell I am. And I mentioned like why do people want to read anything I wrote in terms of songwriting, lyrics, or just my general thoughts on any bullshit. Like it's a problem I have of selling myself like that. But whatever happens, like I'm still proud that I was able to write the book to begin with. It was not something I planned to do at all. To get through a 1,000-page book and hopefully be done with the editing this week at some point. And I'm proud of how it came out because uh, I didn't put any bullshit in it. I tried to be as authentic to myself as possible and to be as honest as possible about everything. Like even like my mental breakdown stuff in 2020, which led to this. I have an album just about my COVID experience, a couple albums where people will probably get sick of me speaking about the COVID times. But I have a lot of albums from 2020 on regarding my mental breakdown, anxiety I was going through, and paranoia, all that weird shit that people usually don't want to talk about. Like I put it all out there as honest as I could do it about my like own sexual life or lack of sexual life. I put everything out there for people to just read. Why do people care? I don't know. But I wrote an album. The last album I wrote, I think it was the last one, was called Weaponized Sex. And it's just about like weird sexual stuff. And that's why like I had to speak about some of that stuff as well. I don't really get too personal about stuff. And not in every album. There's 54 albums. Like, my life is not that interesting that I can fill up a book with stories and anecdotes from my life. Like, there's some of that, my gambling addiction in the past, and some of the drug habits that I had in the past. And I figured that would at least be interesting to people. I got some gambling stories because that was my ultimate like vice. I loved to gamble for a long time, and there's some stories about that. There's just more of my imaginary side. Like the first albums I wrote were like true concept albums about like science fiction stories about a waitress from Mars. There's, the first chapter is about a medieval Lorelei myth from the Rhine River. Like I have a double album that's a story about medieval times like that with like a perverted king. It's very Game of Thrones like story. Like, that's what I based it on pretty much. But yeah, the book's kind of all over the place. That's kind of how my brain is. That's kind of how I just made this video that's at 40 minutes. the editing process was, the usual stuff, but it's more about organizing my thoughts so I don't sound like a demented, just yakadoo, wackadoo, yakadoo. I don't think that's a word, but yeah, the editing process for me was more about organizing my thoughts together somehow because I kind of just ramble like this, and it's not really. It might be interesting to hear me speak like this, but to to read a book is different. Like you want to have some kind of structure to it, and maybe the Bruce Springsteen book helped me the most to make it a timeline from 2006 on, and kind of have a building foundation like that. But I need to edit it again. I might do 200 pages today or tomorrow, and then today's April 21st, so hopefully I can get it done over the next 7 to 10 days, while also making, excuse me, more videos and discussing other topics. Real quick, I think the next video I'll make, I'm just gonna list 10 more albums. Excuse me, 10 more albums that were pivotal in my book, that helped me write the book, that helped me write my my own songs and stuff. And I don't own these on vinyl, so I'll just talk about them and recommend them. Um, 'Cause there were 10 albums that I wish I had on vinyl, but I'm not going to go buy 10 albums just to show, that I own these albums. So the next video I make will probably be on Wednesday, and I'll talk about 10 albums that were very important to me that I feature in my book. And they're all over the place, from no wave to folk stuff to classical to shoegaze to punk albums to 80s hair metal. Like maybe the two strangest genres of music are 80s hair metal and like emo. Is 80s hair metal ever going to come back again? Like this cycle of music? Like 2050, is 80s hair metal going to come back? I don't think so. But it's still pretty cool. For that period in the 80s, it was a cool MTV generation. But yeah, it's kind of weird to look back at it now. Emo is just pretty much what, like, the emo punk rock stuff from the early 2000s. It's just the Cure and the Smiths, right? Like Joy Division. Emos, it kind of just has a natural progression, but just different types of music claim it, I guess. Whether it was the Cure, the Smiths, and then it became My Chemical Romance and bands like that. But yeah, I'm rambling, so I'm gonna end this video here, and hopefully check out these books. They're all on Amazon in digital form, or probably physical copies, whatever you like to do. But I would recommend all these 5 books. They're interesting people who have more interesting lives, and they've led a more interesting life than me. So go check them out. I recommend all of them. They're well written books, and I think a lot of people like music books. So if you haven't read these, or if you don't know a lot about these artists, go check it out.